Okay, so I will get started now and, tell you who I am and why I am talking. I'm Anassa Hicks. I'm a professor of history at FSU, but I am here today as the administrative vice chair of the Leon County Democrats Environmental Justice Committee. I am moderating tonight's meeting. If you could all mute yourselves again, I can hear someone. So if you could just mute yourselves for now, that would be great. Thank you. So ideally, after I do this whole spiel, you won't hear very much from me because I'm just supposed to be moderating everyone else talking. So I'm just going to tell you how the meeting's going to go from here. First, our facilitator, Claudia Sperber, is going to set an intention for today's meeting and express gratitude for everyone who's come out tonight. And then our committee chair is going to give some opening remarks to kind of orient everyone to what we are talking about tonight. Then there are going to be 2 rounds of the same thing happening. So that it's a question and answer session, basically, so that people can ask questions and get them answered. Questions means questions and concerns. So if you don't have a direct question, but you are a Southside resident and you just want to talk about what has happened or what you've seen and express your concern, you can do that too. Don't feel like you need to have a direct, kind of yes or no or technical question or anything like that. So the way the Q&A is going to work is I'm going to take as many questions as I can get in 15 minutes. So I'm going to be, calling on people and you'll ask your question and then I'm going to move on to another person. But that doesn't mean we're ignoring your question. It just means I'm going to, get all those questions and take notes on them. And then I'm going to turn it over to Blueprint after those 15 minutes so that it's not a kind of slow back and forth, if that makes sense. So there'll be a bunch of questions. Blueprint will answer those questions and then we'll do it all over again. So if we don't get to your question in the first 15 minutes, there's going to be a second round of questions. So hopefully we will be able to get to everyone's questions. Hopefully that all makes sense. I only have a little bit more to say. You might be wondering how to ask those questions. So my preference in terms of asking questions would be that you use the raise your hand function on Zoom. If you go to participants in the bottom of your screen, a little sidebar will pop up and you should be able to see raise hand in the bottom right corner. And if you click on that, your hand will be raised and I will see that you've raised your hand and I will call on you. If you are not on Zoom all day, every day, and you don't know how to do that, you can just raise your hand like this and I will find you that way. But it would be easier if we could raise your hand on the Zoom. We are planning to be done with this meeting by 7 p.m. So fingers crossed that we'll get there. I know I just threw a bunch of information at you. Hopefully the meeting will become clear as it happens. But thank you all so much for being here. We're so excited and grateful for this really impressive attendance. And we're excited to hear from residents of Blueprint. We're excited for their voices to be heard and for their questions to be answered. So with that, I am done and I'm going to turn it over to Claudia Sperber.
Thank you, Anassa. Good evening, everyone. My name is Claudia Sperber. I'm also on the Leon County Democratic Executive Committee, seated with the crew at the top here on the Environmental Justice Committee. My specific role, how I serve, is as group facilitator. We want everyone to have a good, worthwhile, substantive meeting tonight. So I want to help with that in 3 ways. The first, I want to help us stay focused. What is the mission of our meeting tonight? Why are we here? We are here to listen, witness, support, and advocate Southside resident voices. Second, to help our meeting go well, I'm going to try to read the room, notice if anyone needs anything, if anything is going on. You can direct message me at any time in the chat, and I'll try to respond right away and help. The third thing, as Anassa mentioned, is I want to offer a moment of appreciation and mindfulness. So join me in taking a deep breath, calm and focus your mind. We're here for an important purpose tonight, and there's a lot of us here bringing our attention to this. I want to offer gratitude and appreciation for all of those who are speaking tonight, who will share their stories and ask their questions. We respect the truth and the courage with which you'll speak tonight. I also want to offer to all of us that are going to be listening. Our role as listeners is very important. I want to offer appreciation and aspiration that we listen very deeply to what is spoken here tonight. I offer appreciation that everyone has shown up to care about these profoundly important issues that Southside residents are facing in their neighborhoods. Thank you all so much for showing up tonight. I'll turn it over now to the chair of the Environmental Justice Committee, Max Epstein.
Well, thank you, Claudia. I really appreciate everyone being here and starting a dialogue between the neighborhoods, the neighbors, and Blueprint and the city and us. So I'm going to start with a short 10-minute or so presentation that has highlights some of the issues and explains some of the projects that are coming up and where I see things personally. I'm going to be speaking for myself in most instances here. I know the Democratic Party has taken a stance on the stormwater and drainage issues and some environmental issues, but I'm going to be speaking primarily for myself. And thank you to Blueprint for coming to this and to open this dialogue, because this is what we need. And just to let you all know how I got involved in this, I was a tenant at Railroad Square when the FAMU Way project passed me by in 2016. And I was unaware of a lot of the changes that had happened to the project at that time. So you can see here some of the trees and the neighborhood that was lost, along with the Shingles Chicken Shack just recently. And it's my goal personally, or hope, that we can avoid these sorts of issues in the future. Because just a couple of weeks ago, we finished the rest of the trees had been cut down here. And I think that these were an important part of the neighborhood. And for me, it was an issue in the planning process and involvement. But I'd like to start first with some of the plans for the drainage in the city and Blueprint. And as you see on the left, this is a conceptual permit that was applied for and granted last year by the city of Tallahassee. And it shows the current and all of the planned future improvements for the central drainage ditch corridor, which runs from Carter Howell-Strong Park to the north, all the way down to Lake Henrietta and eventually Lake Munson. You can see Cascades Trail and Cascades Park. This is called the St. Augustine Basin. And the St. Augustine Basin is about 1,500 acres that drain into this terminus, which is this Capital Cascades 3dB pond. And if you know anything about me, I've been trying to get this project modified slightly for a long time. Now, when we're looking at the infrastructure that's been built so far, Cascades Park, Anita Favors Plaza, Coal Chute Pond, it primarily serves the north side. It does not serve the development here to the south. And this is where a lot of the communication issues came in and understanding, because I heard a lot of things like this pond was supposed to prevent flooding in nearby neighborhoods, which it doesn't do. Commissioner said that. I've heard that it was supposed to enable redevelopment in this 500 acres in the orange to the south, and it doesn't do that either. So when we're going through these major projects, we need to kind of be on the same page. Some of the things that have appeared are more untreated runoff to Lake Alberta from the Stadium Enclave developer and the new Prospect Row apartments that are going up. So that means if you're taking down acres and acres of forest and trees, it has to go somewhere. So that means more polluted water that's going into Lake Alberta. Then we have Capital Cascades 4, segment 4, which is stormwater improvements here to the south near the Liberty Park and Callan area. We have the expansion of the Lake Stormwater Management Facility in Alberta Empire. And to be clear, this is a City of Tallahassee project. It's not a blueprint project. But fortunately, the commissioners voted to bring back an agenda item at next blueprints meeting that examines this and all the other future improvements as well. Finally, we have the Airport Gateway, which will be starting soon, and it will have its own series of ponds, I think. Maybe Blueprint can tell us a little bit more. But these are all things, in my opinion, that need to be considered together because this project is upstream. This one is planned for 2030, but that doesn't mean anything. That could start in 5 years, it could start in 2. And again, if you're building something upstream from your this project down here, it may have a serious effect. And we need to be doing these as a holistic approach. And over here, you can see the area where Capital Cascades 4 is coming in, their study area, all the way down to Lake Henrietta. It includes the 3DB Pond, which is the terminus of the FAMU Way. And there's a new stormwater model being developed for this entire area. Just to give you a little heads up on the actual water here, you can see the St. Augustine Basin in yellow. This is the drainage system, Cascades Park. It all comes down to the conflux. This is where the central drainage ditch basin meets the St. Augustine Basin. So all of this water is going to be draining into Capital Cascades 4. And again, if you're doing projects up in the watershed that are upstream, those must be looked at if you're doing a holistic master plan of the entire area. To your right, you can see the original 2005 concept that had a pond in this commercial or industrial area instead of going through the neighborhood to the north. And if we're talking about an Alberta Empire pond, well, the channel already runs down over this direction on the north side of the track. So again, if I was looking at this, I would think this might be a decent place to tie in those improvements. So where are these boundaries of these projects? Well, this is kind of the rough outline of what is being shown for Capital Cascade 4. I think it's going to be an entire corridor, and maybe Blueprint can answer some questions, but we're looking at this area probably turning into water, most of it. And I know that there's a birding trail and there's all sorts of other stuff in this area that I think people are concerned about. I think this bird, someone sent this in, this eagle was down in that area. And as far as Alberta Empire, it covers all of this area. Now, does that mean they're going to expand this pond into that? We don't know. But if you live in that area, you should be concerned and you should be thinking about this as we move forward. Well, I just wanted to show you because a similar study area showed up in 2015 for the segment 3D, which is the end of this FAMU Way. The first actual public notice of people living there was halfway through January of 2016. And then in 6 weeks, it had been voted on. So that's just how fast some of these things can move. And as you can see, the pond was supposed to be across the train tracks originally. And remember, I'm over here at Railroad, and that's just what I'm thinking is going on. And it had changed so quickly. I wasn't notified, and it's just concerning to me. And as you can see in this area, it's been sold by Blueprint, and it's now turning into condos for the Stadium Enclave developer and more runoff. And I also wanted to share plans for this final FAMU Way pond. And And again, I'm only going to speak for myself. If this had come across my desk, I probably would have said there's a better way to do this than to buy up an entire neighborhood and put a road through it. And there were trees, there were 10 oak trees, I think 8 or 10 that were 5 feet wide or bigger. And the city of Tallahassee even came up with an alternate plan. All they had to do was widen the median, and it would have saved all these trees. And you could just drive down FAMU Way under 5-foot oak trees. And why they didn't choose to go forward with that, I don't know. But that's again where this environmental justice, social justice, and racial justice come in. So there are going to be displacements, I'm sure, for the airport gateway. And I wanted to share some of the documents that we've been looking at. This was, again, for that 3D area, FAMU Way. And it appears, I don't know, maybe Blueprint can confirm this, but they used what's called the federal standard to calculate what people, the tenants, deserved or needed to relocate. This family was needed $19,000 and only got $5,000. Fortunately, this has been updated moving forward, going through the airport gateway. They will be using the federal standard. People will be compensated correctly. But whenever I or other people bring up reparations or giving people this difference, the actual city line is that it is not legally required to compensate people using the federal standard if there are no federal dollars used. And that's true. But is it ethical or is it moral to do that? And if you don't use the federal standard, you can't get federal grants. It's a lose-lose situation. So this brings me to alternative locations, right? So I fired up my GPS, and this is where I think that since we're at the beginning of this process, we can really talk about these things. You know, one alternative location I saw was this area for the 3D pond, which connects over here. There's already a large area, and the answer is people, you know, are going to get displaced. This is not a perfect process, but with a lot of planning and a lot of communication, it can be minimized. I thought this would be a good location for it. And for the Alberta pond, well, where's the lowest point in that watershed to the north? It is the FSU Stadium and these parking lots right here. There's a reason why the area, the Southside, floods over there, and why Lake Alberta was built because of the development in FSU and other areas in the northern part of the watershed. So this is where that social justice comes in, because it's entirely possible that half of that pond could be placed here. It could be placed up and down this corridor, and we need to figure out how to do this in an equitable fashion. Another thing to be aware of is that the comp plan is being updated, and there are some areas that look like they might be rezoned to be denser, from 6 acres to 26 acres per acre, units per acre. I know some of these areas like Bond have been talking about it, and this is a conversation we need to have if we want to build affordable housing. But this is just something to be aware of. If you live in this area, this may be coming. And the last thing I really want to address is the contractor has already been selected for Capital Cascades 4. And I do not think that process was very transparent. I don't like the way it happened, but I think the people involved are pretty good, including Jones Edmonds. And the one thing I'm going to stress here is
we'll never know
that when you look at
right?
these ponds, they're being advertised as amenities. And it's nice to have a water body, but this is stormwater. This is pesticides, herbicides. This is fecal matter. This is all the gross stuff that you don't want to deal with. And
moment. Hello,
yes.
everyone.
Hello.
My job is group facilitator, and to help us all again have that meeting we want. Max, I'm so sorry.
We're done. That's cool.
people do mute themselves. It's lovely to hear joyful voices and the communications that are going on, but we do need a mute unless you're speaking to the whole group. Thank you. And Max is our chair. He has been studying, working with neighborhood residents, looking at the trees, talking with people, situations about their homes for so long. So he could probably take us to 24 hours from now, and we would still be learning, and it would still be important. But I want to ground us in our mindfulness of the resonant voices. So Max, if there's another really strong nugget of information that you need to share with people right now, let's do it.
Yes.
But we might want to first let those residents have their time for their stories and their questions.
Sure.
Does that work out?
Yes, I'd like to share just very quickly about the eminent domain, because we did have some questions that came in before then. And there is going to be a threat of displacement for many of these, for these projects, for the airport gateway and for Alberta. And like I said, for the tenants, they are not entitled to a lawyer, unfortunately, but you can come to us and others to be represented. Blueprint has updated for the tenants for the airport gateway. I'm not sure about the city in Alberta. And another thing I would also like to warn is something Blueprint and the city are using is called an incentive offer. And an incentive offer is when they come to you and offer appraised value for your home plus a formula on top. I just want you to be aware that you have the right to get a lawyer for free. They're provided to you for free. Use their services before you take any offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. That was an extremely impressive amount of information packed into a good 10 minutes. So now we are going to turn to questions. So these question and answer periods are intended, as we said, for Southside residents to voice their concerns primarily. So we are not going to prevent anyone from asking questions, but I would encourage people who are not Southside residents to hold back for the time being, in case there are people in these vulnerable neighborhoods who have concerns that they urgently want addressed by Blueprint here tonight. So as has been documented in the chat, my Zoom might be weird. I don't think I've updated it since the onset of the pandemic. So for me, the raise hand function is over near participants, but other people have noted in the chat that you can also find it under reactions. So I see one hand raised right now, but please do raise your hand in Zoom or physically if you have questions. Okay, I see 2 questions now. So right now I see a question from Paul Brewer and a question from Sonia Austin. So let's start with Mr. Brewer, and please do introduce yourself and say what neighborhood you're in as you ask your question. Mr. Brewer, you just muted yourself.
Can you hear me all right now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. My name is Paul Brewer. I live out near the airport, and I'm a county resident, but it is the Southside. And I appreciate everything y'all are doing. Now, I do have a question or concern that I wanted y'all to know about. At the corner of Orange Avenue and Lake Bradford Road, where Spring Hill Road starts, it's a corner there. It has a gas station. Across the street from it is an empty area that used to be an oil refinery. And as from looking at the map, it appears that a pond might be being put there. I just wanted to bring attention to the fact that there was a very famous archaeologist in town who was deceased. His name was Calvin Jones.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard the name, but across the street, he discovered a native village through pottery shards and stuff like that. And so 100 feet away is where this pond might go, and it could have archaeological significance. I don't have any archaeological experience except my brother is an archaeologist in the Virgin Islands. But I think it's a concern that somebody should look into. And that's about it. And it might actually put a damper on some of their plans. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brewer. That was that's fascinating and kind of exciting. So we're going to move to Sonia Austin. And again, I'm not dismissing people's questions, just collecting them so that we can, have a list, kind of a flow with Blueprint. So next we're going to turn to Ms. Austin.
Good evening. My name is Sonia Austin and James Austin. And we were just wondering, he had mentioned legal services. Is that through Blueprint or what's the contact for that?
Do you want me to answer that question?
Let's
Or-
wait. I know it's not a question actually,
Okay.
for Blueprint, but let's wait on
Sure.
answering that question. But thank you. I have it written down. Okay, next we have Nita Davis.
Yes, I'm a Southside resident. I live on Paul Russell Road, East Paul Russell Road, up from the fairgrounds. And I have obviously a myriad of concerns environmentally with the county, but I will just address this one at this time because it considers the stormwater runoff. Now, I see where it's once again going into and towards Lake Munson. And I have a question, and I think this really needs to be taken in consideration. Why are we dumping water that is going, and we know this because it's been documented, all the way to the Wakulla River? I don't understand this. I mean, I don't even understand how they could even take that into consideration, that Tallahassee has a right to dump their waste and pollution in another county, because we know that's where it goes. And I know that Lake Munson is not a man-made lake that the environmental, 30 years ago tried to say it was a man-made lake. I actually have the millstone where they used to mill corn at Lake on the slough that used to not belong to the county. It was, when I was a kid, it was an upside down John boat, and my grandmother owned one half of the lake, and she ran a fish farm because it was a beautiful lake at that time until Tallahassee did start dumping into it. So I want to know at this point, why is this big runoff, no matter what happens, still going into Munson and therefore going all the way to Wakulla River? And let me tell you, I don't know if any of you know where Blue Sink is, but that is part of the system, our water system. And I went out there last year and it took me to my knees. It is a polluted water hole. It used to be one of the most pristine swimming holes. It's right at the edge of the county, off of the, right off the road. They don't even bother keeping people out anymore because it's just a polluted water hole. So basically this plan, the overall plan, no matter where you put the stormwater, it's all gonna dump into Crawfordville, which means it's gonna go into the underground aquifer, right into the river. So I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, the whole thing should be thrown out and rethought, because if that's the best we can do, then we're in trouble. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Okay, this is going a bit out of order of the raised hands, but I'm told that Apostle Willie White has a question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for opening my mic up to me. Listen, my question is this, I am behind the Orange Avenue, south of Orange Avenue and behind NIMS Middle School. So my question is there some dotted lines or dotted red line that's ran along that map too as well? And I wanted to understand what does that mean? Also, and maybe Mr. Epstein can answer that question. also, I want to know, are there going to be laws that would require treatment for any stormwater runoff into ponds? Are there going to be, and let me say that again, emphasize that, are there going to be state laws, federal laws that will mandate that if you've got stormwater runoff of ponds, that is mandatory that they be treated? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Anassa, is there any way I can jump in just very quickly to answer? I know I'm not going to
Sure.
disrupt your flow, but just to answer a couple of those questions really quickly,
Um,
or keep going. Don't mind me. Don't.
I think these are good questions because there's a, the block at the very end, but I promise I'm writing them all down. They will all get answered. Okay, next we have Dora Williams.
Anessa, I see
You're
Dora's
muted.
question in the chat if she's not
Yeah.
able to speak it.
There you go.
Let's try again. Hi, my name is Dora Williams. I do live on the South Side. I've lived in other zip codes and I really love it here. I am a Tallahassee transplant of 22 years and I'm proud to say that. A lot of my stuff is in the chat. However, I would like to point out that there are still people in the South Side that did not get stimulus. I know because I was there. Maybe that's something that should be addressed right now. And sorry, blueprint people and environmental people. I have just a couple of things. Asheville, North Carolina is a model city when it comes to repartitions. And there are other cities doing this, and this can be done. Okay. Affordable housing, how do you create intergenerational wealth without it? And having come from Washington, D.C., I happen to know about gentrification. You know, half the city is gone. So I urge you to think about displacement in terms of me, in terms of elders. It's not a word. I could be there. What do we do with homeless people? That's it. Over now.
Thank you. Those are really important
You're
issues.
welcome.
Next, we have family.
Hi, my name is Cheryl McCaskill, and I'm calling from the Alberta neighborhood. And we forwarded you about 10 questions, and I was wondering whether or not you received them or not.
Yes, I did. I actually was looking for your name in participants. I'm so glad you're here. But I do have those 10 questions, and I was thinking that other people might ask similar ones.
Okay.
But I have them here, so
Okay.
I can just work a few of those into.
Okay, I was just making sure that you had them.
Definitely have them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for sending them. And next we have someone whose name is just iPhone.
That may be me. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get to my laptop, but my name is Dr. Naima Ford, and I'm a resident of the Callan neighborhood. And my concern is with the new construction or roads going in on Potsdamer and Lake Bradford. I guess that's the airport gateway. I think that's what they're calling it. And I just, my concern is that the traffic coming through our beautiful, quiet neighborhood, and what that plan will look like. Maybe this is more of a concern than a question.
Concerns are perfect. So yeah, thank you so much. And you're right, it was you that I was calling on. I don't see any more raised hands in the chat or on the participants list. Does anyone else have a question right now? Remember, this is only the first round, so we'll have another opportunity. Shakiba Gibbons.
Can you hear me?
I see in the chat someone, Shakiba Gibbons, said she had a question.
Well, I know. Hello, I do not actually have a question. I just wanted to hopefully voice my concern as a property owner in Alberta, Empire. My dad passed away about 10 years ago, actually, and he had worked since 99 to buy several properties in that one, really on that one street. Well, it's on Alberta and Hernando, and it was his legacy. A Black man with only a high school education, not having to get a mortgage. He actually just worked until he can afford to buy those properties. He had about 6 of them in that one area. And so when you're talking about displacement, it's bigger than that for me. You're talking about removing my dad's legacy. And it actually brings me to tears. I'm just going to end it at that. I just want whomever's making the decisions to think about, I understand what you're trying to do, but think about what you're actually doing. It's not anything that I will be able to get back. No matter if there's any kind of payments or anything like that, I won't be able to get my dad's legacy back. So.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a really important reminder that these are not abstract issues. They're very concrete. So we have about 2.5 minutes left in this round. So Debbie Lightsey has a question.
You're muted, Debbie.
I don't have a question. I've waited till I hoped all the questions were asked. I have 2 or 3 comments I think that will clarify, maybe be helpful here. If this is the appropriate time. If not, if you have more questions, I'll wait.
Let's see. I see a person in the chat, Dr. Vanessa Williams. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Hello, I am Dr. Vanessa Williams, and I'm a resident of the Bond community. Been here, raised here as a child. Came back to the community. I've seen so much changes as change in the community. My concern is, I was told today this meeting was going on. You have a lot of resident people in the community that are not aware of what's going on. My concern is making sure that the people that is affecting you communicate with them, get their concerns and all of that about what's going on. Because you have a lot of people in the community that don't know. They don't know until they see a bulldozer coming close to the community. They don't even know what's going on. So I'm thinking that there's a better way that we can get the community pretty much involved with what's going on, so they would know up front as to what their choices are. Because see, now with the pandemic going on and we're not able to meet in a physical place, and a lot of these residents that you're talking about that own these properties and stuff, they're older people and they don't know what's going on. They don't have a clue. So I'm just thinking that is there another way that we can get them involved or get that information to them and just start making some concern, because I think if we start saying that we're concerned about a lot of this stuff wouldn't just happen overnight, because look like a lot of stuff is happening overnight. Just like down the chicken house down on Gamble Street, man, the things have really changed. And those storm, I know over on Orange Avenue, my family have property over there. I remember 10 years ago, they came through and took 10 acres of land and made a holding pond. And get this, they built an apartment complex. I'm like, that don't make no sense, You're taking family property that my ancestors has it's just we need to know what's going on. We need to know how we need to get involved, and we just I just say we have a voice, and we just need to know who we need to connect to be involved with this and see that this thing does not affect the people that has really poured into the community.
Dr. Williams, as group facilitator, I'm going to take a moment here and say the Environmental Justice Committee, we are with you 100%. We are working on organizing and we want to keep up with you.
Okay.
We are getting near the end of our first round of questions. It's hard to put a cap on that. These questions are people's lives. They're your homes. They're your
Yes,
parents. They're your children. They're your heritage. They're
absolutely.
your dreams. They're your future. So we are not here to just talk about technicalities of what's going on with procedures and policies and city planning. We understand. And
Yes.
we're reaching out to the hearts of everyone here, especially our Blueprint staff, to understand the depth of the importance of what we're doing here. I know Anassa has been working hard moderating and recording questions. So is this the moment where we want to give her a moment to pull her brain together and see how she wants to organize these questions and bring them to Blueprint? And we are keeping track of all questions, including what you put in the chat. We will follow up. Help us out. We're volunteers at the end of the day. So reach out to us if you don't hear back, because we want to keep moving forward on this. And Nasa, thank you so much for moderating so skillfully and handling all these important questions.
Thank you. I'm happy to do it. So obviously there's a lot of overlap in themes here. So I will try to group questions together. So if you notice that I'm not asking your question, immediately after the question it proceeded, I have not lost your question. I imagine I'm going to be talking maybe to Autumn from Blueprint. Is that right? Or will it be someone else? I know there's people.
Like, and I can kind of shuffle as we need to.
Okay. Hi. So the first question was for Mr. Brewer, and it was about the possibility of there being a native village where a pond might be going on the corner of Orange and Lake Bradford, where there's a former oil refinery. So I guess the question is Blueprint aware of this? Are both parts of that question true? Like, will there be a pond there? Have you found evidence of prehistoric remains there?
Gotcha. Okay. Well, give me a chance to just we appreciate the invitation to come today, and I think that I fully when you talk about Blueprint staff, I mean, every single one of our staff is extremely engaged and absolutely engaged in being a citizen of this community too, not just a staff member of Blueprint. And I think that public employees are truly public servants, and we get in this profession because we care about the community that we live in and making it a better place for all who live here. Including our own families in the ways that we all individually interact with the people who live here. So I feel really strongly about that, and I do what I do because I'm obsessed with public spaces and how public spaces are so influential and how we humans interact with each other. And when we have positive, good, healthy public spaces, we have good, healthy interactions with people. And sometimes the people that we interact with are complete strangers. And that is what makes us a more connected and resilient community, by having positive relationships with strangers. So that being said, we have a couple of people on the call today, and I think it's worth it to at least introduce so that when they start talking, you know who they are. We have Susan Emanuel. She is our public information officer, which I think gets to Dr. Williams' comments about communication and that being such a critical part of every Blueprint project. And we can go into that a little bit deeper when we get to that question. We have Daniel Shear. He is the design and construction manager for Blueprint. So he oversees all of the project managers for the individual implementation of the projects. And we have Abraham Prado, or Abe Prado, and he is the project manager for the Airport Gateway project and the Capitol Cascades Trail Segment 4 project. And both Dan and Abe are engineers, professional engineers, licensed engineers, and it's a lot that goes into that. And then Susan Emanuel and I are both planners. We both have a master's degree in urban and regional planning from FSU. And then we also have our newest Blueprint employee joining us today. I think he's just going to kind of be listening. Today is truly just day 3 for him. His name is Derek Brown. and he is our right-of-way manager for Blueprint. But he will be very much engaged in any acquisitions that may be required as a result of any Blueprint project, but specifically for this crowd, probably the Airport Gateway project. And so anyhow, so he's here to listen, and we're so pleased to have him be a part of our team and the expertise that he brings. 25 years of experience working at DOT, most recently as the deputy right-of-way director for the entire state of Florida for DOT. So great people. Okay, so Abe, I'm going to turn to Abe on the actual question from Mr. Brewer, because it sounds like it's really, kind of like, what is the scope of the Cascades Trail Segment 4 project, and how does it address any findings that have cultural or archaeological significance?
Yes, thank you, Autumn. Good evening, everyone. So one of the items that we have started doing for the area along there is and it's actually, it overlaps a little bit between the Airport Gateway and Capital Cascade Segment 4, but both projects really will entail an archaeological survey, which will identify any areas. And we've started that effort for the Airport Gateway, and have done what we call the desktop review, which is analyzing and reviewing data that's available. So that effort started for the Airport Gateway. We'll start that for Capital Cascades. That's part of the scope of work of what's being done, and obviously that will identify any areas or verify the location of any of those areas. We'll also do a contamination report, which is just what it sounds like. We'll review the sites and analyze them, and we'll also do geotech as needed. So any contamination and any of the sites that are going to be used will be analyzed and made a determination of whether that site is appropriate to be used either as a stormwater pond or an amenity site or anything like that. So those are steps that will be done along the process, and the project will be adjusted as necessary depending on what the outcomes are of those reports.
Okay, so are you saying that you haven't found yet those remnants that Mr. Brewer was referring to in that area?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we haven't started the work for specific to Capital Cascade Segment 4, and we just started the work for Airport Gateway. The desktop, what we call the desktop review, which is analyzed, it's not actually sending somebody out to the site because we don't know exactly what the site is. So right now what we do is we do a broad stroke review of the site. So I'm not saying that, I'm saying that we've started the work for the Airport Gateway, and we will undertake that work for Capital Cascades 4. But I do appreciate that bringing that up. We'll relay that information to our consultant, although our consultant's knowledgeable in the area of archaeological review, and usually they do a lot of literature review. I am familiar with Mr. Jones, some of the work that he's done for some of the previous projects I've been involved with. So that's what desktop review is reviewing all that available data.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So the next question I'm going to ask, because I think it might be a question for you also, is the question Dr. I think Ford brought up at Potsdamer and Lake Bradford, the issue of traffic and the concern that this would create more traffic in what sounds like a lovely, quiet neighborhood.
So if I may, can I be so bold as to share a map for us to look at that will be sort of easier so we're all looking at a graphical representation? If that's okay with the moderator?
It is fine with me. I can't enable you to share your screen.
I think I can do it myself. I just wanted, before I hijacked your meeting.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Yeah, okay, then yes, please share this
as a group facilitator moment, absolutely, Abraham, to share your maps and orient the community here. It sounds wise and helpful. I'm going to ask that we tighten up our concision of communications because we have so many pressing questions. I want to remind everyone that we are keeping track of your questions, we're keeping track of your comments, and we will keep going. This meeting is not the end. We are gaining momentum. So if we don't get to your questions tonight, hang tight. We're working together with you. And Abraham, Autumn, Blueprint folks, if you can keep in mind staying really on point, as I often need help doing. But let's try to stay on point to make room for more Southside voices.
Absolutely.
And I think that the question in the, if you know of something like Mr. Brewer mentioned of the archaeological significance, let us know. You know, I mean, this is something that, you know, if we may know about it already, but we may not. So, I mean, just bring it up. We'll take note and we will incorporate looking into it. So that's how something can be taken from this meeting, really meaningfully applied to the project itself.
Yeah, and maybe, I mean, I will try to answer the question about traffic. So as quickly as possible, perhaps without the need of a map, just so we can keep moving. You know, traffic analysis and traffic studies are part of the airport gateway. And that's one of the tasks that we are currently undertaking is traffic analysis and traffic modeling. But, you know, one of the goals for the airport gateway was to create designated entry points into Innovation Park and into to the airport. And with the ultimate goal of being able to alleviate some of the neighborhood traffics that cuts through either Potsdamer or Levy. So, you know, within the goal of the airport gateway itself, we're trying to alleviate some of that traffic that currently uses Potsdamer. I'll use that as the immediate answer, since that's the that was the specific question, by creating those designated entry points.
Thank you. I think we'll probably stay on you, although I don't know how expertise is necessarily divided in Blueprint. Apostle White asked about laws that would require treatment for stormwater runoff. And I thought of that question as you were talking about the kind of initial investigations that Blueprint does into, you know, whether there are ancient remains on a property or whether the area is contaminated. So I know that's not exactly the same thing, but he asked about whether this stormwater runoff is going to be treated before it, you know, runs into ponds that might affect water connections, etc.
Well, if I can jump in real quick, a stormwater pond is the first stop for the polluted stormwater. The stormwater pond, in its essence, is really the first treatment opportunity for water that's running off of roads. It could be a stormwater facility, could be a ditch, and it could be percolating through the soil of the ditch, and that serves as a treatment, or it could be a pond, which is, I think, the question for today. So, in its essence, a stormwater pond is receiving dirty water, and there's a treatment that the stormwater facility itself provides to that water and removal of the harmful elements. Not all of them, and that's just not, stormwater ponds don't remove it all, but a good stormwater pond can take a good chunk out of that before it sends it downstream, which really gets to the question that Ms. Davis had about Wakulla Springs. And the stormwater pond, the 3 dB pond that we talked about earlier, that one is 100% retrofit capacity pond. So it's treating previously untreated stormwater. So it's not treating water for new development. And so it's stormwater that's currently not being treated. So by creating a pond, you're actually treating and removing the pollutants from stormwater that was not being treated in the past. And that pond is part of the system that goes down to Lake Munson, exactly like Ms. Davis said. She's exactly correct. But before, there was no opportunity to remove the pollutants from that stormwater. And now by the creation of the stormwater facility, it's actually removing the pollutants through the treatment of the stormwater, the treatment that the stormwater pond provides. So I hope that helps. But I don't know about the NIMS map. That was a thing that he said in his question. Behind NIMS Middle School, Apostle?
Oh, yeah, I think that was actually, so I just looking through the questions that I wrote down, there are a couple that I want to save for later, but I think that was a question about a map that Max put up at the beginning. I think he was asking about a red dotted line in those maps. Is that what you remember?
Well, then let me follow up on the regulations piece for the stormwater. Okay. Feel free to jump in here, but there are regulations that define how a stormwater pond is built. There's regulations at the local level, and then there's regulations at the state level. And all the stormwater ponds, to be able to get the permit, it has to meet the regulations as laid out by the local or the state and the state instructions. And part of that is, you know, how big it is, what its treatment time is, how much water is coming into it. It's a lot of equations in stormwater modeling and stormwater engineers that put a lot of time and effort into that. Abe, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's a good summary.
Okay, thank you. So like I said, I know more questions were asked than the ones that I directly asked, but I really feel like the questions, for example, that Ms. Williams asked, that Ms. Gibbons asked, that Ms. Williams, two Ms. Williams, I guess, asked are really big questions. So I want to kind of hold on those until round two, so that that can be a larger conversation than what we have time for right now. So now I'm going to turn it back briefly to Max, because a couple of people asked questions that actually I think aren't actually kind of directed at Blueprint. So the first one is Sonia Austin asked about legal services and where those are available for people who might, you know, need legal representation.
Sure. So I see Debbie and Jerry have their hands up, so maybe we can get to them at the next round of questions that are coming up.
Yes.
Right now, if you are a property owner, you are entitled to legal representation. I believe it can be anyone. So all you have to do is find your own lawyer, but you can email us, the environment@leondems.com, and we will help you connect with attorneys that specialize in eminent domain cases. And we already have a couple that are willing to help. If you're a tenant, that's a little different. Unfortunately, the Blueprint Board and the commissioners are not interested in providing legal representation to tenants. So again, you can email us at that at that site or that email, and we will help connect you.
Thank you. And
Sure.
the second question that I caught that I think was directed at you was Apostle White's question about kind of the dotted red lines alongside where it sounds like he actually lives in one of the
Yeah,
maps that
I'm
you
gonna
showed.
have to get with you and you want to leave your email address or just pop on real quick and tell me what you're specifically asking. I know NIMS is, or can you just email me, Apostle, and I can answer your question that way? It might be a better way to do that.
Okay, Max, how do I get your email address? The dotted line that I'm referring to is on the map.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure if how the map is drawn, whether or not that is Pacific.
Which,
and it looks like
this one right here you're talking about?
It looks like
yes, I see that. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
It looks like
right.
it's
and
the
so that
watershed.
Line, yeah, I'm down.
Yeah. That looks like
Yeah,
it goes
go
right to the north of NIM. If I believe it goes right to the north of NIMS.
Yes.
If you look down here, this is Orange Ave, I believe, right here. So yeah, that's a different watershed that will not be affected by these projects. But I will leave the email in there again. Anyone can contact us. I did want to address Nita's question real quick about and the stormwater and the rules and regulations. Nita, a technologically advanced stormwater master plan for the central drainage ditch, what we're talking about right now, that is how we get clean water. That is how we get cleaner water getting to Lake Henrietta and then Lake Munson and further downstream. And as you know, Lake Munson is horribly polluted and it has large toxic cyanobacteria blooms, potentially toxic. And these are things you really don't particularly want to be living next to. Again, I'll speak for myself. I don't want to sit next to it, live next to it. And unfortunately, our state regulations for treating stormwater is almost nothing. And right now, the accepted way of building a pond is to build it pretty much as large as you can and let the water just sit there passively. And that's something I believe we really need to get ahead of. We can't keep doing that. You can't expect to just dig a hole in the ground and it's going to clean the water for you. You need wildlife, you need plant life, you need active treatment and filters, which fortunately, it looks like is going to be incorporated into Airport Gateway 4. I'm very happy because the contractor said they realize that if you're going to have an amenity, which is a park around it, and you're not going to have trees and you're not going to have other stuff, you need active treatment. So, you know, this is something we suggested for the 3DB pond and some other you know, projects, but and even at the local level, there's not a whole lot for water quality. For water quantity, there is, but we need to get to the place where we're actively treating the water pretty much at every stage before it gets down to Lake Munson. So I still envision this going from Frenchtown all the way down to Lake Munson. And I just keep thinking, how amazing would it be to actually have clean water going into Lake Munson? I don't know if there were any other questions that I needed to address, but I think it's really up to us and up to working with Blueprint to create an amazing project here, because state standards are not great. Local standards are not great, but we can. And that's what these dollars are meant for, is for looking forward.
And to
And
Matt's
yes,
point,
yeah.
There's the city does, or the county does monitoring at the at Lake Munson, and they've been able to show that since Lake Alberta, the big stormwater facility north of the railroad tracks on the east side of Lake Bradford Road, there's been a significant water quality improvement at Lake Munson. So to your point, Max, I mean, the more, you know, the more we do in terms of treating this old runoff, like runoff, I mean, we can't fault the people of the past, because you know, our past practices, we didn't know what we were doing back then. Just like in like 100 years from now, the people that are 100 years, they're going to go, what were they thinking back in 2020? You know, and we're doing the best we can, given the resources that we have, all of us, everyone on this call, you know. So we just, you know, trying to do the best we can. So it's, yeah, keep doing it, having good infrastructure, working together with the neighborhoods around it, and doing the best we can, given the resources and the site constraints, which is part of the modeling piece.
Autumn, I'm going to jump in here and say thank you so much. Thank you for naming also the history of how this is moving, that it's true. 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 25 years ago, we didn't have the technology, the awareness, the environmental awareness, the environmental justice awareness that we have now. So all of us as residents of Tallahassee, including you all that are managing our tax dollars, we all want to work together to make a more sustainable, environmentally just and fair Tallahassee. I believe we are at the moment now of our second round of questions. Before we get there, I want to invite us all to just take a moment, take a breath, have a drink of water, shake your shoulders out. This is such serious information, and yet we're facing a screen. It's hard. We can lose our humanity with each other over these screens. So it's beautiful, and we appreciate that we're all hanging in there. We're staying focused, but we might need a water moment or a shoulder shake moment. And then I'm going to turn it back to Anassa. I believe we're going to take and work with another round of questions, perhaps prioritizing questions of people that are worried or have comments about their homes, their safety, you know, of that degree. Anassa, thank you.
Yes. So round two now. Round one was excellent. Hopefully round two will be just as good. So just for my own notes, I'm going to give the first question to Connie McCaskill, who emailed us a list of 10 questions. So I have that written down in my notes that I'll ask Blueprint one of those questions first. But next, Debbie Lightsey, who had a comment that she didn't make in the first round.
Okay, I'll be as quick as I can. I am a Southside resident. I live in the Lake Bradford neighborhood, which is impacted by the airport gateway, which is misnamed in my view. The Blueprint Airport Gateway historically ran down Spring Hill Road, down Lake Bradford, down Spring Hill Road to Capitol Circle and the airport. perfect route, straight, direct, didn't impact existing neighborhoods. FSU hijacked that project when they decided they wanted a road running down through their southwest campus. And so the impacts we're seeing, questions about Potsdamer, questions we're seeing about Providence neighborhood and all those impacts, that wasn't the original Blueprint project. And as I say, it was hijacked, and Blueprint is dedicating, I don't know, 10, 20, $40 million to the airport gateway alternative route. And that's what's impacting all these neighborhoods, including my own. So we need to make that clear. The second issue is I heard a question about why they're running all the stormwater down through the south side of Colorado Springs. Whoever they is, are not doing this. The south side is at a lower elevation than the rest of the city of Tallahassee, and the water naturally runs downhill. And so the water has historically come down off the Red Hills through all these natural water courses, which are now called the East Ditch and the West Ditch and the Central Ditch. This is where the water always ran. And it always went down to Lake Munson, and it disappears into a sinkhole and goes down to Wakulla Springs. I'm on the Wakulla Springs Alliance board. Our job, our mission is to protect and clean up the groundwater in Wakulla Springs. So we've done a lot of study of this area. So nobody is directing that water there. It's always gone there. 3/4 of the developed city drains to Lake Munson. And that's just what the topography dictates. The question is, how are we going to clean up the water before it comes down through the south side? And this notion that you have clean water in stormwater ponds, the stormwater ponds are meant to collect the dirty water and treat it before it goes further south. So the notion that you're going to have clean water in the stormwater ponds is really not based on anything. That's where the dirty water is supposed to go, supposed to be clean there. And all these ponds are in fact retrofit ponds. So that's my statement of the historical fact. Now the question is, what do we do about the impacts of all this and the displacement and the reparations issue? These are all real issues and need to be handled much more sensitively than they have been in the past. We are displacing people in these neighborhoods. Where are they going to go? There's too little affordable housing in the community, so there's no place to house these folks when and if they are displaced. So we've got to look at the big picture here. Our whole conversation today, and I have to laugh about Max and his fixation on stormwater. Max, before you came along, sweetie, I was the person on the city commission and in this community that was totally fixated on stormwater and sewage and groundwater. So this is where the water goes. The question is, how do we treat it? How do we clean it up? How do we displace fewer people? How do we impact fewer cultural resources? But the notion that you're going to get clean water in a stormwater pond, you just got to give up on that. They're intended to collect the dirty water off development sites. And the reason we have so much more water and we have so much more polluted water is that pre-development, this water was clean and it was filtered through natural systems and it wasn't running off parking lots and roofs and whatever, and there were not a zillion automobiles. So we've got to live in the world, unfortunately, that we find ourselves in. So I would like to kind of focus this conversation not on specifically and totally on the individual projects that are proposed, but on what we could do better with these projects and how we can refocus some of the Blueprint funds away from engineered projects, huge, big public projects, to spending some money from Blueprint that will directly benefit the people of the South Side. Huge, big public infrastructure projects is not going to fix the South Side. We need private investment down there. And so that means we've got to use code enforcement. We've got to do some land use changes. So all the undesirable land uses, the heavy commercial, the light industrial, the junkyards, these things have got to be removed so that it becomes attractive for private investment. And we've got to focus a whole lot more on affordable housing, not just through Blueprint, but through the city and the county. So this is a huge, big, complex issue. And while I love to talk about hydrology and stormwater engineering, we're missing the big picture when we talk about Blueprint, which is the biggest source of money in our community right now. It dwarfs the city and county capital budgets. How can that money be spent to directly impact the lives of the people on the South Side? How do we help provide employment and training and affordable housing and childcare, things that can help people be able to get to work? So I think it's going to take a big attitudinal change at Blueprint, which has always been about infrastructure projects, and say, how can we focus this money now to help people directly? And one of the conversations underway right now is, why are we spending all this money funding university projects, the airport gateway, the convention center, the FAMU stadium? Why are we spending all this money on big projects that more closely track what the universities need than what will help people, real people with real lives on the South Side who are struggling? They were struggling before COVID, and they're struggling more now.
Debbie,
So,
I'm gonna
let's
jump.
face the facts. Water runs downhill, and the poor people have always lived at the bottom of the hill. There's the environmental justice
Bingo.
question. So I just want to put this in some context and say we've got a lot of big issues to work on here. How these existing infrastructure projects are handled and how they impact people, and what we're going to do about the displacement issue. They're all important, but there's a bigger picture to look at here too, about how this money could be better spent, I believe, in the future on some other projects that more closely benefit individual citizens on the South Side who are struggling and have been for years. That's the end of my political statement.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Jerry Say.
You're
You
muted.
are muted.
Still
Still
muted.
muted.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so when it comes to trying to save these communities, we've been beating the bushes at Alberta and Bond and other places to help you find a way to do that. And one of those ways is to get your property on the local register of historic places. That's one way, and it's a zoning protection. It takes a while to get those designations, but I've talked to the Alberta people, I've tried to neighborhood organizations, I've talked to the Bond neighborhood organizations, and they are not forthcoming. So we've had people over there on the ground knocking on doors. So Dr. Williams, to your point, and a couple of other folks who are asking what to do, you guys are going to have to help us help you. Because if you don't keep up with this, kind of keep track of what's going on in the city council and county commission, you're going to find yourself bulldozed like every other neighborhood on FAMU Way.
Jerry, I'm gonna jump in here for a moment. I have some people asking me, and you're right, we all want to watch out for getting bulldozed. And part of that mindfulness we want to have is that Southside residents who are immediately concerned about these specific projects, that we do give them time to speak up. There's so much that's important here to address on a bigger structural level. That's 100% true. But part of my job when that moment of appreciation came was that we hold our focus for the Southside voices who are directly impacted or worried about being directly impacted by these projects right now. So if we can all take a moment and connect to that and think, how can we support if there are more Southside residents here who are feeling impact or feeling concerned, that we make sure to hold the floor for them.
Well, let me just say this, and that is, if they are interested in what we're doing, they need to email me their information. Because while this is all well and good being worried, they need to know what to do to stand up and take care of themselves.
Thank you, Jerry.
So
Can
thank
put your
you.
email in the chat.
Thank you. So I see that Stephen Martin might have a question. Mr. Martin?
No, I was just making comments. No, this is for Southside residents. I'm shutting up, biting my tongue tonight, as I said,
Thank
out
you.
of respect.
I appreciate that. Okay, I see Nita Davis and I see Dr. Williams again.
Hello, Dr. Williams. I just want to elaborate. I keep hearing that we're being contacted. I'm a resident, like I said, been here all my life, left, came back, been here for the last 11 years. Okay, so my first concern is the communication. You know, I know that a lot of things are going on at City Hall, but if you're not aware, a lot of people are not aware of a lot of stuff that's going on. Okay, so you keep saying, a lot of people say, well, we contact your neighborhood association. That's not working. You need to contact the people that are homeowners, the people, because a lot of people are not connected to those so-called neighborhood associations. They don't get anything until after the fact. You know, they're not a part of that neighborhood association, but they are homeowners and they've been in the community forever. So we need to find a way how they can get involved, or they need to find out what they need to do. They're not a part of the neighborhood association. If there is a legit neighborhood association, I mean, they're not getting the information. I put it like that, and they don't get it to the end. So we need to find a way that, like I said, we don't wake up the next morning and we hear bulldozer, and you're saying, well, we contact your neighborhood association. We're like, no one contact me. No one I'm just saying that there needs to be a better way of communicating, especially to the people that it really affect, not the ones that's outside looking in. So we just got to make sure that these people in this community are aware of what's going on, and make sure that who's supposed to be representing them are truly representing them, that they're really saying that's what they're wanting. That's all I'm saying. It's a concern, and we need to get that straight. That way, I believe you have more participation. You have a lot of more people concerned. A lot of people will voice their opinion. A lot of people will do this if they would just be in the loop and know what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you. That comment is well taken, I think, from everyone. So I know I said, sorry, Nita Davis had a question, but I see a question here from someone who hasn't asked a question yet. Connie Jenkins Pye.
Yes, this is Connie Jenkins Pye, Southside resident, business owner. Classic Cup Barber Shop. They're looking at getting the park. I know they're getting surveys about what we want the park to look like. And basically that's on Orange Avenue. What's the projected time frame they're looking at this park being built and the structure of it? Because I know about several meetings now since February, they've been asking, what do you want the Southside Park to be? Because it's the first time we truly have a park on Southside. And basically we've been going to different events in the community, different things, but what's the time frame they're going to collect this data? And what's the time frame they're going to start looking at the blueprints about how the park going to be, developed, when it's going to be developed, and when it's going to start being built? Because we've been talking about this quite a while until the last year started during the pandemic.
Thank you. Okay, I see a question from Nita, and then we have a question from Imam Mujahid. I probably said that wrong, but let's start with Nita. I'm not hearing anything.
Okay, I'm sorry. Dr. Williams, I completely agree with her as far as the communication breakdown with the different neighborhoods that are impacted. And that really seriously has to be addressed. Even if it's a knocking on doors campaign. I saw that with the last year with the shingles, Boynton Hills, that whole thing, that was a complete disaster. And I really believe that the people that came forward speaking for the neighborhoods were not speaking for the neighborhoods. They were, and I'm going to say something that a lot of people might not agree with, but I think it was manipulated.
Yes, I believe it was.
Geniusly manipulated. And I feel that, FAMU, the board of directors at FAMU were the first ones that the city went to that gave the thumbs up. on that FAMU way. And then they like stepped back into the corner quietly. And then they went to bond and they promised bond some sidewalks.
Yes.
And as far as that flooding goes, no, that whole thing about kids walking through 4 feet of water, whatever. Okay. I not even going there, but they played bond community against the shingles community. It was sort of like a domino, and it was so sad to watch.
It was.
One community with more money play against another community, play against even a poorer community. It was tragic, and the whole city lost on that one. But I'm telling you what, FAMU was the quiet one, was the wizard behind the curtain, okay? And it's shame on them for not stepping forward. But the city, at the same time, was the puppeteer. And they puppeteered it, and they got what they wanted. FAMU got what they wanted. They didn't have people sitting out there playing dominoes, driving from the airport. And I'm sorry, it was aesthetics. To them, it was aesthetics. Everyone has different aesthetics.
Ma'am, again, I'm pulling my facilitator moment.
I know. That's it.
You are so right on, and you are so powerful. I think we've got your point. And again,
I know. I just think that's why it's so important.
Haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, it's important for I agree with Dr. Williams. We need to get everyone out there.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we have really time for one more question, which will come from Imam Mujahid.
Trying to get on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. No, I just wanted to ask you a question about, I know they said they were talking about some affected areas. And there was an area or two that I had some concerns about, particularly when he said something about Lake Anita area in the Melvin Street area down from FAMU. I mean, really, it's right across from that Lake Anita part. And then on the Orange Avenue side, down where the holding pond is. And I'd like to even look at that map, but I couldn't tell from that map what was going on. So those are just my concern areas. Thank you. I'll mute back.
Thank you. Okay.
Vanessa, I know you're almost at time. We have a bunch of questions here, and this might have echoed to the Imam's question as well. I believe we would like to take a quick look at that airport gateway map that Abraham had offered to show us, and we just didn't take him up on that moment. I'm wondering if we could just get a screenshot of that. And Anasa, if you would be able to just read aloud those 10 questions with no discussion, but several people would just like to get to hear what those 10 questions were. Could we make that happen?
Yes. So number one, Abraham, if you could share your screen and share that map that you offered to share initially, that would be great. It seems like people really want to see it. And will probably be related to some questions that I wrote down here. I am happy to read these 10 questions, although as everyone can see who has a clock somewhere, it is 6:57. And I do want to take those 15 minutes for Blueprint to answer all the questions that we've collected. So we're certainly not going to end now. So yeah, I'm happy to read these 10 questions from Connie McCaskill and hopefully, and Cheryl McCaskill, and hopefully they can be answered at least in part tonight, and then maybe we can get some direct answers from Blueprint in the future. So I will read these 10 questions. The first one is, what is the timeline for construction of the stormwater pond? And is the decision for the construction of a stormwater pond final? This is in reference to a plan for a pond the size of Lake Alberta across Lake Bradford Road that affects homes and businesses in the Alberta Empire neighborhood. The second question is, why is there a need for another stormwater pond in that area, especially since there's already a stormwater pond on Lake Bradford? Third question, exactly where will this stormwater pond be in proximity to the neighborhood? Question 4, what is the threat to the homes and businesses in Alberta Empire? Is it the threat of displacement of residents, seizure of property, or loss in property value, or possibly all three of those things? Fifth question, are there any threats to the homes and businesses in the Alberta Empire neighborhood as a result of blueprint plans? Sixth question, are there alternatives to the construction of a stormwater pond? Seventh question, if property will be seized or purchased, how much notice will property owners get? Eighth question, how would compensation be determined for these residents, especially since there's a diversity of, situations, homesteads, rental properties, etc. Ninth question, how much input will property owners have in this matter? In other words, is this a done deal or not? Or is it not a done deal? And then the 10th question is, what is the next step and how can the property owners participate in the process? So those are the 10 questions about the Alberta Empire neighborhood. And I was planning to start this round 2 of the answer session by asking that first question, which was what is the timeline for the construction of this stormwater pond? So if Blueprint could just start with that one question, that would be great.
And if I could say just real quick, oh, I'm sorry, Autumn, go ahead. I was just,
Thanks.
yeah.
Your chat there. That is the city's project, but acknowledging that those questions could be, like Max put in the chat, that you could ask those questions to anything. But just from a technical standpoint, the Airport Gateway project would not go, any stormwater pond that would be constructed for the Airport Gateway project in the Alberta Empire area is upstream from the Airport Gateway project. So our stormwater facilities would all be downstream from Alberta. But one thing that's true for this and for any other future questions, if we don't get to all of the questions or answers today, you can always submit them to us. And certainly we can submit those questions to the city and we can get answers, and then we can respond in kind with the blueprint policies for the real estate and acquisitions and provide those answers alongside the city's responses on the Alberta Empire facility. Would that be helpful, Anasa?
Yes, I think a lot of people would find that very helpful. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some other questions that came through round 2. Ms. Jenkins Pye asked about the Southside Park that's being proposed, and apparently people on the Southside have just started being solicited for input on that. So does Blueprint have any insight into the projected time frame of this park?
Yeah, Dan Shear's gonna respond to that one.
All right, good afternoon, good evening. I'm trying to pull up my email real quick, but we have just started the outreach on that project. As mentioned, it's an exciting new park at Orange and Meridian next to the temporary improvements that were just made. And I know you want me to be very concise, so I'm going to do that. But our planning and design and permitting is starting this year, and we expect to end at the end of the calendar year this year. And initial construction should start in early 2022 once we receive the permits. So basically what we're doing is we're creating a park facility at the existing public spaces that are there at Orange and Meridian Road on the south west side of that intersection. Really exciting. About $2.5 million should be invested into a new park facility there.
And I can actually share my screen if Abe will let me, of that site, so everybody can get kind of the geographic reference here. And I'll try to go quickly to the share. Yes, share. I think I got it. Did you guys get the PDF, or did it just go? I'm sorry. Do you guys have the PDF?
Yeah, we see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, excellent. All right, this is Adams Street, Monroe, Orange Avenue. And currently there is Leon County owns this piece of property right here, and there's a floodplain and a stormwater facility that's right here. This park project that's being talked about, and that we appreciate her taking the survey and hearing about that. So that's kind of the idea, right? Is that we get the information out and people take the survey, was to say this project will include constructing a park amenity around the stormwater facility in the floodplain area here. And so what would you like to see in this park that, reflects you? So, we've heard playground, we've heard some exercise facilities, space for food trucks, things like that. So that data is being analyzed right now against the constraints of the site and the budget, of course, too. And I think, Dan, did you end up pulling up the project snapshot that had the timeline with the design at the end of this year and construction in 2022, or?
That's correct.
Okay. And the project also has another component, is the enclosure of the East Ditch from from Monroe Street to Meridian. There's a huge open ditch right there. So we're going to put that underground in a box culvert system and then put a trail on top of it to facilitate that pedestrian connectivity, safer pedestrian connectivity. This is just south of the Town South Shopping Center. And then it also includes providing $1 million towards Star Metro for the construction of the Southside Transit Center, which is essentially where this purple box is. The overall purple box just designates the area that we're looking at, but it doesn't designate necessarily any other elements to this project. There's only 3 elements: the enclosure of the ditch, the $1 million for the transit center, and the creation of the park amenity down here. There was a citizen that asked about Polk Drive in your question, Mr. Mujadid. He said so right now we don't have any improvements planned for Polk Drive, although the city has a sidewalk project on Polk Drive. And we did the temporary improvements here where the transit center will be. So I hope that answers his question about Polk.
Thank you. Okay, so we are over time, so time is meaningless now. But I do want to not hold everyone hostage and allow people to get back to their lives. So I want to capture some of the questions that I didn't address in the first round, which are a lot more, well, they're not intangible, they're actually extremely tangible, but they're holistic. Obviously, Blueprint is an agency that does a specific thing, and Blueprint can't be held responsible for what people see, for what we see, many of us see as failures on the part of the city or the county or the state in terms of protecting people's properties and protecting people's legacies. But several people spoke to issues of gentrification, issues of land seizure, issues of feeling bulldozed and blindsided when property has been taken from them. I think it was Shakiba Gibbons spoke really eloquently about her father's property in the Alberta Empire area and how hard he had worked to amass property as a Black man living in the Deep South. And so my question for Blueprint, I realize, is a difficult one, but this planning, these plans are happening in a city with a really fraught and painful racial history, and the neighborhoods that are being affected by these plans are Black neighborhoods. And I will say, Debbie Lightsey pointed out that water runs downhill, that's how gravity works, but it's also how institutional racism works, that downhill is where the Black neighborhoods always are in every city in America. That's just how that goes. So my question for Blueprint is, how are you keeping these legacies in mind as you make these plans? The plans cannot not happen. Things have to happen. We're all aware of that. But how are you keeping in mind this kind of painful legacy of, essentially Black property being seized and Black people feeling left out of the conversation as you go about this project that is going to happen?
It is a big one, huh?
It is, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I appreciate the sentiments in the beginning, because you're absolutely right. We are the implementers. We are not the policy setters. That happens at a much higher level than us. At your elected official level, they select the projects, and our task, our job is to implement them. And we're always ready to talk about the projects and the implementation and the process for implementing those projects, which I think we got to a lot of that today. It's interesting because it's infrastructure investment in communities does yield value, quality of life increases, and property value increases, right? So if you happen to be a property owner on a piece of property that's, you know, in an area where there's going to be an infrastructure investment, then great for you, right? If it's a trail or a park, you're looking at, I've seen studies that say between 5 and 10% in property value increases next to trails and parks. I mean, that's a pretty good piece there, right? You got health benefits of being near recreation. You've got the, and that goes for tenants as well, but from the tenant side, so you've got the benefits of being near new transportation opportunities, increasing your mobility choices and your accessibility to places like grocery stores, if you're lucky to have them nearby, or schools, or connections to Pineview in this case, perhaps. So you've got more transportation choices with these infrastructure investments. So yeah, I mean, positive change does attract new development, because now all of a sudden, you know, your property values are increased. Well, why are they increased? Because there's desirability to that, right? But the ways that we can address that through the implementation of infrastructure projects are limited to just that, implementing the infrastructure projects. We're sincerely involving people who live in the area in the design of those infrastructure projects so that the project itself reflects the people that live around it. For example, the survey that was done on the Orange Meridian placemaking, you know, we specifically ask people in those surveys that we do, where do you live, right? Do you live within a 5-minute walk of this area? Do you live within a 1/4-mile radius? Can you take and put a push pin into a map of where you live? I say over half of the responses that we got on the Orange Meridian survey, and we're up at, I think, over 275 at this point, over half of them are people that live within the walkshed or the 1/4-mile radius of the park area. So that's great. That's like, maybe that doesn't sound good to you guys, but that's actually pretty good for survey responses. So, you know, taking the input from the people who live around to make sure that the investment in these infrastructure projects are reflective of the wants and desires of the people who live on the infrastructure.
Autumn, I'm going to respectfully jump in again, just to really ground our focus in the nuts and bolts and guts and heart questions of these Southside residents that we're responding to. Everyone can be so pleased and grateful about the infrastructure in the parks, but that does not speak to the legacy of a Black person's home and land getting seized by the city. So we're not asking right now about the investment you're doing overall. We're specifically raising the question and the awareness. What can be done differently to stop the seizure of Black-owned land in Southside? We know you don't make the decisions, but we know historically people can say, no, I will refuse to do this. We have to find another way. We are done through eminent domain seizing Black-owned lands. So the question is not about the infrastructure investment. It's about the seizure through eminent domain of too many Black-owned properties on Southside.
Autumn, may I just?
Please.
This hurts. It's not really a black or white thing. It's when it happens to me thing. I've done this for 25 years throughout the state, and you go into low-income areas, undeveloped areas, rural, it hurts. And the connecting bond there is when it happens to you, that when it really hurts and you cry out. But the reason that it's being done is
again, the same facilitatory moment is called for.
You wanted a heart response. Being a Southside resident, I'm trying to
We're not looking for a sharing of pain. We are naming a reality that historically and currently, Black-owned land and in Southside is getting seized more than in other areas. So we're not looking for shared feelings. We're looking for, how can this be different? What is the response?
There is growth. If you want a response, I would say, I would recommend, strongly recommend, speaking to your local representative to get this, to get your wishes done. Other than that, this is growth, and Unfortunately, as hurtful as it may be, and it's not a painful issue, but as hurtful as it may be, it needs to happen. There are cases where it needs to happen. So speak with your local politician. And like Autumn said, this is not done in a vacuum. You may like to have more of a voice, more involvement with it, but this is not done in a vacuum. So we are really trying to involve those that are impacted. And being a Southside resident myself, I guess the environmental justice is speaking for me as well. And that I thank you. But this hurts. That's what it comes down to. And you want to know what you can do. How do you want to prevent? How can you prevent it? If you can, your best effort will be to speak to your representative and be as informed as you possibly can. Allow us to do our job. Listen to what is being offered to you and make the informed decisions from that.
So what I hear is that you as Blueprint have no plan to address this. Thank you.
We
That's what
that we have projects that we've been designated to implement, and if the project requires, and the definition of that project that we've been told to implement is such that it is a road widening, for example, Bannerman Road, other side of town completely, but it's a road widening, and there will be acquisitions all along Bannerman Road for the widening of that road. Now, when given a choice, this is, well, I'm just giving an example of the fact that
not working.
the community, and if given a choice to make the road go to the north or to the south, this could be in the north or the south side of the community. If there's a vacant lot, we'll choose the vacant lot over a home lot. Absolutely, all day long. So that's, that's part of our process, is to avoid the impacts when and where possible. Absolutely. Sometimes it happens, and that's just the truth.
Okay, well, it's not about sometimes. It's that you took every Black neighborhood along Fairview Way and you didn't stop. When you could have gone in a different direction, you all didn't do it. From Boynton still on down to the end, you didn't do it. Stearns, Mosley, people asked you to try a different way, and you did not do it. You didn't.
It is getting close to 7:30. I realize I asked a very difficult question. I'm a history professor. That is what I do for my job. So it's also it's not a question that has an answer that I was expecting to wrap up tonight. And if I can use a water metaphor, I think that Mr. Brown is right in part that right now we're having a conversation that's downstream and we need to start upstream, because these plans that people are hearing about that are being implemented now, those decisions were made a while ago at meetings that we as residents and citizens apparently were not invited to. So we need to be at those meetings starting now, starting maybe 5 years ago, but especially starting now. So I'm going to turn it over to Ronnie Wright, who's had her hand up, and then I am going to give the mic back to Max, because again, it is 7:16 and everyone is probably hungry at this point.
Hi, I'm Ronnie. I am from Providence neighborhood, but I'm not representing Providence neighborhood this evening. I just came because you all invited us and wanted to, wanted us to be here with this conversation. I did have a quick note. I feel like something that could possibly be helpful that I think might need to be looked into is that there is a lot about comparing what one project does one way to the way that things are being done in the South Side. And I think that there is a stark difference in the way that things happen in the South Side. And one of those ways is communication. And so I think that when projects happen, this is kind of what I'm seeing, that when projects happen, communication goes out in a specific way. So for example, legally, you have to notice within 500 feet. You have to, or that you're saying, oh yeah, we're gonna send out emails or something like that. I think we need to really put time, money, boots on the ground into really making sure that we are going above and beyond in terms of letting people know what's going on. Because it sounds like something's happening over here, but then you're only letting the people who are directly affected by that thing because their house might be taken away, no, but not the neighbors just down the way or the neighborhood down the way. I think it just needs to be expanded even further because it sounds very focused, it sounds very concentrated, but as we're hearing in this conversation, there are a lot of projects going on and a lot of things going on, and people just are unaware of what's happening, and it's their responsibility to find out. But if we're talking about things like reparations or whatever, there is a generational difference between the engagement of the citizens who are African American and government. And we all are very much aware of that. And we need to make sure that because of that, we're doing more than we would do for just a regular project. And I think that's a very important thing that can be done on the city side. It will cost a little, or the government agency side, it'll cost a little bit more money because you have to notice more people and do more things. It's a little more work. You have to pay contractors a little bit more because they have a bigger area. But I think that's really something that you all could do directly that might affect the outcomes of these things in a different way. And that's all I had to say for this evening. Thank you so much for letting me have just a couple minutes. Appreciate you.
Thank you. All right, well, I have been tasked with wrapping this up, and I would like to give an opportunity to Blueprint to respond also to that about how can we open up our lines of communication, or maybe we can just start emailing each other and working on a plan, because I hear exactly, I keep hearing this over and over again, is that only a very specific portion of people end up finding out. And even for someone like me who reads every single agenda item that goes before the county and the Blueprint, it's hard for me to understand what's going on. It's hard for me to understand how these projects actually are going to work, how much they're going to cost, what it's specifically going to do. And I want to wrap up also by bringing up Debbie's point. So we have all these projects. What I keep saying is, instead of designing one a segment at a time, we need to look at this holistically. And there's $60 million going into the airport gateway. I think there's another 14 or so for Capital Cascades 4. So that's $75 million that are going into that area. And is there a better way to utilize these funds, or how do the people there want the funds to be utilized? Is a road the best choice? I know the Blueprint is the board tasks the staff with these projects. I don't think some of the projects really make sense, but they still have to carry them out. But we have, and then if you look at the convention center that is now potentially up in the air with 30 million from that, that's $100 million that's up for grabs. I mean, it's been allocated already, but how do we look at all these things, from the stormwater to the affordable housing and displacement? And I also want to, I think it was Dr. Williams who talked about building generational wealth instead of destroying it. And I always go back, since I've done all my research on FAMU Way and the displacements that have happened there. Well, the average family, some of them who've been holding on to property since the 50s, which was a time when Black folks could not own land, could not get mortgages, and they were pretty lucky to have gotten help at that period of time. Well, they got paid $100,000 or less for their property. How can you you cannot replace a home anywhere, basically in Tallahassee, for that. I mean, if you want to give people a side grade or a downgrade, but the average home in Tallahassee is over $200,000. So, and like Mr. Brown said, look, the water runs downhill, man. This is the way it's worked forever. But right now, we're only catching up. We're catching up to where we should be. We need to be looking forward to climate change, 50 years down the road. We need to figure out how this is going to affect the investment and get the private sector in here. And through planning and through doing all these projects together, we can minimize these impacts. Are we going to lose homes? Are we going to lose businesses? The answer is yes. But when that happens, we can make sure that people are compensated correctly and allow them to move up in the world. So I really hope that this is the beginning of something bigger, because we have problems.
Yes.
We have homelessness. We have the destruction of generational wealth. We have, how many Title I schools do we have? And I know, I believe the Pineview principal is here. Well, these are significant issues that $100 million could help tackle. And I hear exactly what you're saying, Stephen. You know, you cannot replace your family homestead. You just can't. So again, we have to make sure that there are no other options. And again, in this legal process of eminent domain, if you're organized up front and your neighborhood is organized up front, you can push back against it, because the government has to prove that there is no viable alternative. And I'm pretty sure there are viable alternatives for a lot of these project sites and locations. I mean, I gave one for FSU. I hope FSU considers putting a pond. They should have to put a pond on there, or at least consider it. So I'm going to hang around after this for another half an hour for anyone who wants to talk to me or look at my maps or whatever. I know we need to wrap this up, but this is not going to be the last meeting that we hold, and hope that we can unite as a community and do the right thing. Thanks.
So, as Max said, formally, we want to thank all of you so much for being here. I think this has been a really amazing meeting, and possibly the most amazing thing about it is hopefully it won't be a singular event. This will be an ongoing conversation. We're so appreciative again to all of you and to Blueprint for doing this. Maybe even in the kind of near future, we could meet in person, physically, be in each other's presence. I think that would help with a lot of things. So like Max said, some of us are going to stay on for a while longer. Claudia, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else, but this is the last thing I'll say. Thank you so much for being here tonight.